Welcome to the Midwest.motogirl podcast, where we'll dive into all aspects of building a badass life around motorcycles, mindset, and overall female betterment. Get ready to explore how your mindset can make or break your experience and enjoyment in the male-dominated world of motorcycles. Welcome back to the Midwest.motogirl podcast. I'm your host, Sydney Gard. You can find me on Instagram at midwest.motogirl or through Facebook on my racing page at Sydney Gard Racing. When my podcast went live last week, I started sharing it on social media on my own pages and in some of the women's motorcycling groups that I'm a part of. And honestly, I had no expectations of people actually listening to it, especially my guy friends that I race with. I figured they would be the last people to be interested in. But one of them sent me a message the next day asking why I was talking about him in my podcast. And I kind of laughed and was like, what are you talking about? And then I realized oh wait, I actually did tell a few stories about you and a couple of the other people that I race with. He was just joking and giving me a hard time, but it was really cool to see that he was actually interested in what I had to say. And so I asked, I was like, why did you listen to this? I didn't think that you would have any interest in this, especially since it was targeted to female riders. And he's going to be a control rider or a new instructor with my local track day organization this year. So he was listening to see if there was anything in one of my podcast episodes that would help him become a better instructor. He's tried to help me become a better rider throughout the last couple of years with track days and with racing. And I know that he's helped his wife become a faster rider at track days. So he's definitely picked up on the fact that women learn motorcycling different than men. But it's been really difficult for him to nail down exactly how he has to explain things to make it click with a female versus when he's talking to guys and helping guys become better riders. And so I think it's pretty known in general that just women and men think differently. So it makes sense that their approaches to motorcycling might be different as well. My experience at times at the track has been that the instructors trying to get me to be faster aren't speaking in a language that's clicking with my brain. Or sometimes they just aren't giving feedback that feels constructive, which can be a huge hindrance to your riding progression, and it can also be really frustrating. So this episode is for anyone who is trying to help someone become a better or a faster rider, and it's specifically applicable to coaching female riders. The reason that I think that it's more applicable to female riders is just because these are all the things that have helped me as a female rider, and I've noticed that the other women that I've talked to at track days, a lot of their experiences have been very similar to mine, and they've learned kind of in a similar way that I have. From my riding experiences, I've come to the conclusion that the motivation is not the same for women to go out on the track and ride as fast as they can as it is for guys. There's definitely an adrenaline that comes with track riding or racing, which might be what motivates guys to go out and push the limits and ride as fast as they can. I'm not a guy, so I cannot answer that. But I don't think that the adrenaline is enough to motivate a woman to go as fast as they can, as it may do that for a guy. For me specifically, the adrenaline is really awesome, but what motivates me to go faster is either chasing somebody on the track or kind of battling back and forth with them, or someone physically yelling at me. So think of big, scary drill sergeant type of person who is yelling at you at a boot camp, telling you to do better, go faster. And because they're telling you to do better, and they're maybe being very intimidating to you, it makes you want to do better. So that type of feedback, it motivates me to want to be better and do better. And so during a race, I will actually yell out loud in my helmet to myself, telling me to go faster, or telling myself that I'm faster than the person in front of me, in the form of saying things like, come on, you're faster, let's go, pick it up. And there's just something about doing that kind of occupies my brain where I'm not able to think or worry or focus on other things going on around me. And I've also found that it's really motivating to me to keep wanting to try and get faster and to keep racing when other riders recognize that I've made improvements on the track by saying good job, or you made big improvements today, or wow, I'm proud of you. Like all of those things motivate me to want to continue riding at the track, racing, and wanting to get faster. So there's kind of like a whole combination of things going on there. But you really have to figure out what motivates you, and sometimes even figure out what kind of feedback you need from an instructor and vocalize that if you feel like you're not getting what you need to become a faster rider. The first couple of years that I was doing track days, I would work with an instructor or a control rider pretty often. They would follow me, I would follow them, I would ask for feedback, and I kept getting the feedback that I'm doing everything right, I just need to do it faster. And I never found that helpful or motivating. I actually found that kind of feedback frustrating because I kept thinking to myself, if I'm doing everything right already, then why am I not getting faster? Or I was wondering like, okay, he said that I just need to do all these things faster. Well, how do I actually do these things faster? Like, what does that even mean? I just want to say, like, please do not give that kind of feedback to a rider who is trying to get faster. Like, do not just give them like one big blanket statement about, you're doing great, you're doing everything right, just do it faster. Because it's probably going to make them frustrated when they're not getting faster. And it could honestly even make them stop coming to the track because they start thinking that they've gone as fast as they'll ever be able to go. And that like they've progressed to the point that they've peaked where everybody else has peaked at a faster point than they are. So they're like, well, what's the point? I'm already as fast as I'm going to get. I'm one of the slower riders at the track. I don't want to go anymore. And in reality, they're miles away from being at their peak or the fastest that they can actually get. Almost all of the women that I've met at the racetrack are pretty calculated and fairly like cautious type of people, it seems like, which is a big difference from a lot of like the male riders that I've met. Again, I'm not a guy, so I'm just guessing here, but it really seems like the adrenaline builds for a guy and their brain shuts off a little bit, where they're able to push the limits without thinking about it so much. Where women may be able to like quiet the outside noise, like quiet the noise of the outside world. So like they're not thinking about like what's going on at home, but there's still 100 things running through their head about the riding that they're doing right now. So like they're in the moment, they're focused on their riding, but their brain is still going 100 miles an hour. And that's usually how it starts out for me, until I start yelling at myself. And then once I'm yelling at myself to go faster, my brain is occupied by that like audible speaking that I don't have the brain capacity to think about other things. And so women tend to be more like of the caretakers and the worriers of the world, which may play a big impact on them being more cautious on the track. Because they might be more worried about running off the track, or they might be more worried about crashing than the guys may be. I've experienced this as well. Like, so I'm out on the track, I'm riding, I've gotten some big blanket feedback about like, you're doing great, keep it up. So I'm not actually like focused on working on something specifically. And then my brain kind of starts to wander, where then I'm thinking about like, oh, I don't want to crash. Oh, if I do crash, how am I going to get my bike home? How am I, like, what's going to happen to me? Who's going to clean up my stuff? Like, especially for me, like when I go to the track alone, that's been something that's gone through my head before when I'm on the track. And then it makes me be even more cautious because I don't want that scenario to play out. And I don't want to have to find out about who's going to pack up my stuff if they take me to the hospital, or like how my truck is going to get home or anything like that. And so like, if I'm thinking about like these different scenarios that I don't want to play out, I'm being more cautious. So obviously I'm not pushing as hard as I can. I'm not pushing to be the fastest rider that I can. And I think that a lot of instructors that I was working with were trying to give me positive feedback, thinking that it would be motivating and that positive motivation would push me to go faster. And they might have been doing this because I was a girl and I had mentioned like, hey, you can't talk to me the same way that you talk to the guys. Like I'd kind of voiced some of those things already. So they might have just been trying to like give me positive feedback to like make me feel good or be nice. But when the feedback is purely positive, and it's just like a blanket statement, it doesn't offer guidance or anything for the rider to focus on. So I was just letting my brain wander and wasn't pushing. And then that kind of makes me be more cautious and thinking about all the things about track riding that I find are scary. Instead of being focused on something that would make those things seem less scary, or being focused on something that would actually make me faster. And so eventually I started voicing to my friends at the track that the feedback I was getting was not helpful. And a lot of those friends were faster riders than I was, or they had been racers at some kind. Some of them were even like control riders that had been trying to help me. And so as I started doing that and telling them, my feedback basically went from one spectrum to the opposite end of the spectrum, where the feedback started out as nothing specific for me to focus on. And then we went to the other end of the spectrum where I was getting 20 things to try and focus on all at the same time. And I was getting people telling me to work on my body position. I was having them say, like, look where your eyes are at. Work on your braking zones. Learn the race lines better. Think about your feet. Think about your foot position. Like, where's your head at? Brake a little bit later. Like, all of these things, like probably 20 different things all at the same time. And I just could not focus on that many things at a time at the track. And I think that's pretty common across the board for both men and women, that you cannot focus on everything at one time, and you can't fix everything at the same time. Like, you need to focus on one thing at a time, and when you feel like you've made improvements in that area, then move on to the next area that you can make improvements in. I kind of think of this approach as like the snowball effect. Similar to like the snowball effect you sometimes hear about when you're paying off large amounts of debt, where like you would focus on the quick wins first, the things that you can accomplish like quickly to like make the biggest impact. And then once you've made that big impact and you feel like you're progressing, then you can move on to the next biggest thing and the next biggest thing, until what you're working on are like these little small things that they still make a difference, but they're not making like huge differences in your overall lap times. I've worked with a lot of different instructors and coaches, and when we got to the point they were giving me real feedback about working on my body position or braking or throttle or passing, I found that it made a lot of sense to me while we were standing there talking about it. But once I got onto the motorcycle or I was out on the track, it didn't click anymore, where I couldn't figure out how to like actually put it together with my riding. And when I experienced that, I didn't realize that asking more questions would actually make it click. But you don't know what you don't know. So I didn't know what questions I should be asking. Last year I was at a race. I was chasing somebody who I was faster than on corner entry, but my bike was slower than his. So I'd be right on his tail going into the corner, but then he would ride away from me after the apex and through the straightaway until we got to the next corner. And then I would catch him going into that corner again, and it was just kind of like this cat and mouse game. And I couldn't really figure out how to pass him. I ride a Yamaha R3. It's only 320cc, makes like 38 horsepower. It's not fast where I could just like give it more throttle and like power around this person. We're both like on 300s. His 300 had a little bit more guts than mine did. And so he was just like driving away from me. And I was like, what's happening here? I ended up asking my friends that I was pitted with for the weekend a very general question about like, how do you pass somebody? And they were kind of like, what do you mean? How do you pass somebody? And so I kind of like described the situation to them, like where I can't get around this guy. I'm faster on corner entry, but I feel like I just like run out of gear. Like I need to be shifting halfway through the corner when I'm like still leaned over, and I'm not comfortable shifting when the bike is that far leaned over. So I'm just running out of gear, and then he's driving away from me. One of the guys that was there, his name was Dalton, and he started explaining that in this situation, he was saying that sometimes you want to hold a higher gear going into the corner and sacrifice your corner entry to have more drive out of the corner, like to get out of the corner faster. And then he said if I could do that, basically like hold a higher gear and slow down on my corner entry a little bit, then I could be on the gas sooner and hopefully like drive out of the corner harder and faster so that I could get around this person. He said that like the opposite was also true. So like if I was leading and somebody was behind me trying to pass me, that's where I would want to downshift and have a faster corner entry, hoping that I could hold them off going into the corner. And then once I got to the apex, then I could drive out of the corner, and hopefully my corner entry was so much faster than theirs that they would be playing catch up at that point. That specific feedback and like the situational feedback, it kind of like clicked in my brain. And so I was thinking about it. I'm like, I don't know. But then we went out for the next race and I found myself in the exact same situation. I was trying to pass the same person again. Then I thought about that advice that Dalton had given me. And so I held a higher gear and went into the corner slower, but I was able to get on the gas so much faster, and I had more drive and more gear getting out of the corner where he couldn't catch up to me. And so I was able to pass him and then stay in front of him. And once I passed him, I ended up dropping like crazy time off my fastest lap of the day. It was like 7 seconds or something, like just ridiculous. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that if you're the rider and you're getting stuck, try and ask questions surrounding like what you're stuck with or what you're struggling with. And if you aren't getting the answers, like keep asking until you find answers that like click with you. And if you're an instructor, try and give them something like a specific situational type of feedback based on like what they're struggling with. And I know that that might be difficult because you're not going to know exactly what that rider is struggling with, but if you can pinpoint something that you know that they're struggling with, like in my case, people could tell that I was stuck and couldn't pass this guy. And so like you're working with a rider and you can see something like that, explaining something situational about that could really help with them, and it could click in their brain. When you're giving constructive feedback to a rider, try to pick out the specific things that make the biggest difference for them quickly while also being positive. Try to provide feedback that's factual, concrete, and that the rider actually believes. When you can give someone specific feedback, it helps keep them focused. And when there's some kind of positive affirmation that the rider believes, like they believe that they have the ability to go faster, it can help motivate them and keep them like engaged so that they want to continue pushing, they want to continue learning and trying. You can start with a how-to type of statement, then describing what happens when that's executed properly or correctly, and then invoking some sort of like emotional state where the rider actually believes that they can do what you're telling them. So in my case, with the passing has always been a challenge. So specific advice and explanation about holding a gear versus downshifting in the corner was really helpful. And not only was I given feedback about like how to pass and what would happen if I was able to execute my shifting correctly based on the passing situation, but Dalton also told me like at the end of it, like, you got this, Sid, you can do it. And so like he literally hit all of those points that I'm talking about here by describing something to work on, explaining the correct execution, and then providing a positive motivation, making me feel like I could actually go out and do that. It also may sound silly, but like try drawing a picture of what you're trying to explain to that rider. Sports coaches don't just review game film with their players for the fun of it. Like, it actually helps someone correct and improve their skills when they can physically see what their body is doing. So one example of someone drawing me a picture that was really helpful was also Dalton. And I was asking him about like race lines through a corner. And so he actually drew it out for me with an extension cord on the ground, where we were talking about the corner, and he was like, okay, so like you can picture the shape of the corner. It's two corners that you treat as like one big double apex corner that we were talking about. And so he made the shape of the race line that he has seen me and then he has seen like a lot of other people take through that corner. And he was like, okay, you're doing this. And then I'm able to visually see that shape with the extension cord. And then he changed the shape and was like, okay, try going through it the same way. And he was like, so instead of like this big, wide looping corner, you kind of treat it more of like a V shape where like you drive in really hard and really deep, and then your apex might be a little bit slower, but then as soon as you get your bike turned, you can be on the gas immediately instead of having like this big, wide, swooping corner. And once again, being able to see a visual picture of what I was doing versus like what I should be doing, it clicked. Another example of this is passing. Like I said, I've always struggled with passing, especially figuring out like a safe place to pass somebody. So I was watching a YouTube video from Ken Hill Coaching a few weeks ago where he explained passing on the track. And he had some riding film that he was showing, and at different points in the video where like different corners on the track, he would stop the video and explain where that rider was going to go and like what would happen if you would pass there. And so he was like actually drawing arrows on the screen showing like, okay, in this situation, this rider is going to hit the apex, and then if they're using the whole track correctly, they're going to come out wide. So in that situation, trying to pass somebody on the outside is a bad idea because you are going to be trying to pass them as they're coming out wide and using that whole track, and you guys are going to have the potential to collide. Whereas if you would just wait a couple of seconds or a split second for them to make their apex and go wide, you can cut on the other side of them, where then the bikes are going away from each other. And so him drawing pictures and explaining with arrows in which direction different bikes are going to go, it was really, really helpful to me, where it made me feel like, okay, passing actually makes sense. This finally clicks. And now I haven't been able to ride since I watched that video, but I saved it. And when I go to my first track day soon, I'll watch that video again, and I'm hoping that it will really help. Like it feels like it's clicked in my brain, especially because now I'm able to also explain it to you guys. I sent that video to another girl from the track who has also struggled with passing, and she kind of thought the same things that I did about it, where it really made things clear. And when you're able to visually see a picture of something and then have some kind of like explanation around that picture of why it's right or why it's wrong, it was really, really easy to understand. And so the last point that I want to touch on for riding coaches and instructors is that if you've been working with someone and they don't seem to be getting it, or there's something holding them up where they aren't getting faster, even if you're giving them specific feedback on their riding, and they're just not getting it, don't give up on them. Instead, try explaining it a different way, or approach it a different way, or maybe even go and talk to another instructor and be like, hey, I'm working with this person, and these are the things that we're working on, or that I'm explaining, and they're just not getting it. Can you work with that person? And the reason that I say that is because my friend Scott, who is the one that listened to my first video and was trying to see if there was anything that would help him be a better coach, he has tried working with me a whole bunch of times, and he's tried explaining things to me a whole bunch of times, and it just never clicked. But then I asked basically a blanket question to the group, and Dalton answered that question in a way that actually made sense in my brain. So it might be that person isn't getting it just because the way that you're explaining it to them isn't quite clicking, but they don't know what they don't know, so they don't know how to ask that in a different way that they can understand. Again, you can find me on Instagram or on Facebook. My Instagram is the same as the name of the podcast. It's midwest.motogirl. And if you think this was helpful, or maybe there's some good things in here that could help other riders, please feel free to share it. Follow the page if you want to. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you guys soon.